Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Makkot daf Tetvav 15. We are near the bottom of Yudal and Mabet, but let's do a little bit of review. So hold on just a second as I share my screen and we'll get started. So we're in the third and final chapter of Masechet Makkot, discussing circumstances in which one is liable for lashes for having violated a biblical commandment. Our Mishnah listed a variety of prohibitions for which one is subject to lashes. And we saw that our Mishnah takes the view of Rabbi Akiva, who says that lashes apply both when the Torah tells us that the punishment is lashes and when the Torah tells us that the punishment is karet. We also saw three exceptions to the general rule that negative commandments are going to be subject to lashes. First, or that commandments might be subject to lashes. Specifically, we saw that a mitzvot aseh, that positive commandments are not subject to lashes. A lav she'ein bo ma'isa, and a prohibition that requires no action, meaning if you don't do anything and that is how you violate it, you also will not generally get lashes. Unless it's the Torah specifically says it. So, for example, if you just leave over a korban and don't do anything with it, so that requires no action, and so as a result, you won't get lashes. And a lav shenitek la'aseh, and finally, a prohibition where there is a positive action that you can do to fix it. So, for example, if you steal something, what should you do, Mark? If you steal something, you should return it, right?
Yeah,
you should return it. That's what you should do. If you steal something, you should return it. And so, just as and how do we know that a lav shenitek la'aseh does not get lashes? Because the punishment of lashes in the Torah, in Sefer Dvarim, Perek Kavhei, in Pasuk Gimel, it talks about lashes, and in Pasuk Dalet, it talks about muzzling. And so we learn that the Torah we can connect these two concepts. And so as a result, just as muzzling is not something that can be fixed by performing a positive commandment, so as a result, every other commandment that is going to get lashes is going to be a commandment that you can't simply fix by doing a positive commandment. And, we can argue that just as muzzling is a negative commandment, therefore we don't have it positive commandments, even though we had another pasuk that had taught us the concept that mitzvot aseh are not subject to lashes, because in Dvarim Kavchet, psukim nun chet and nun tet, it says that if you will not be vigilant to perform all the commandments of this Torah, Hashem will make extraordinary your blows. And so it's understood to be referring to lashes there. And so the idea being that, and what does vigilance mean? Vigilance means not doing something that you're not supposed to do. And so as a result, that vigilance doesn't apply to positive commandments, because positive commandments are telling us what we should do. And then a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, we learn that based on the concept that we say that you should be vigilant. That you will not be vigilant to perform. So the word perform is suggests that if you must have done something wrong. And so it's only by doing something wrong that you will get lashes. So those were the lessons that we saw. And now we're going to pick up by noting that when we say a lav shenitek la'aseh, again, that's a negative commandment that has a way of fixing it through a positive commandment, that sometimes something that might look like a fix is not truly a fix. And that is because the positive commandment, we're going to see, applies even when the negative commandment was not violated. And so if you can fulfill the positive commandment without violating the negative commandment, so then we're going to say that is not a lav shenitek la'aseh, and therefore it will get lashes. So let's take a look, and we're going to pick up with the second to last word on the second to last line on Yudalad Amud Bet. Amar Rabba Bar Barchana. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So it was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that as kol losh sase shekadmo ase lokin la'alav, that any negative commandment that has before it a positive commandment, you can receive lashes. Now, what exactly does that mean? Let's take a look at Rashi. That what this is coming to tell us is that even according to the view, which is the universal view, but according to the view that one does not get lashes for a sin for which one can do a positive commandment to fix. Kedetanya loso siru noser tisrafu. That, for example, you're not supposed to leave over the korban, and if you do leave it over, well, then you should burn it. So that shows that there's a positive commandment to fix it. So ba kasav litain ase acher lo tase. Lomar she'ein lokin alav. That's where we say that the Torah gives us a positive commandment to do after the negative commandment, and therefore you're not going to get the lashes for the negative commandment. Shenitek, because that's going to fix it. Shenitek because of es ha'ase liyot onsho shalav v'tikuno. And that's going to be the way one fixes having done and the punishment for having done the negative commandment. Lomar lo tasekach, don't do, as if it's saying don't do this. V'imasita asezot, but if you do it, fix it with this manner. V'hipater, and that way you'll be exempt. V'ashmi'inan Rabbi Yochanan, and what Rabbi Yochanan is now coming to tell us. Hani mili be'asei habal achar halab, that this only applies to a positive commandment that comes after the negative commandment. Now, that doesn't mean like after the negative commandment in the Torah, although Tosos initially thinks so, but we're going to see it refers to what in practice would come before and come after. That the only time you're able to fulfill it is after you have violated the negative commandment. So, for example, when it comes to returning a stolen object, you can't do that unless you've stolen the object. When it comes to burning a korban that has been left over beyond its deadline for eating, you can't burn it unless you've left it over. Indeed, you shouldn't burn it while you can still eat it. You should eat it while you can still eat it. So, about aseh shekadam es halav. However, a positive commandment that precedes the negative commandment, and you are able to fulfill it before the violation of the negative commandment, that is not a fix. That is not a fix for the negative commandment. And even if you were to do it after the negative commandment, and even if it were to look like a fix, lo niftarta min hamalkos, you will not be exempt from lashes. And we are going to see that an example of this is the requirement for somebody who is tameh to leave the Beis Hamikdash. That applies whether you became tameh in the Beis Hamikdash or outside the Beis Hamikdash. So that is not, and that is always going to be applicable. And so as a result, don't think that if you were tameh and you went into the Beis Hamikdash, that this commandment to leave the Beis Hamikdash is somehow a fix for you. That is not a fix, because it applies whether or not you entered the Beis Hamikdash illegally.
Interesting. There was a funeral service here not too long ago, and they had a sign up: Kohanim have to enter from another entrance.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Well, they would usually say that the Kohanim should not enter, and that they should go to the courtyard. And that's because we have a special space.
Oh, so they could
that they can be part of the service, that they can listen and be part of the service without being in the building.
Now, how, when they go to the cemetery, are they allowed to go to the cemetery?
No, they don't go to the cemetery.
Can't go to the cemetery.
Kohanim don't go to the cemetery unless It is their immediate
That's
relative
what
who
I'm talking
passes
about.
away.
Their immediate
If they're
relative.
it's their immediate relative, the Torah specifically says that
The
one
mother
can
and
that a
father,
Kohen
brother,
for
sister.
mother, brother, father,
Yeah, we
sister,
went to-
son, daughter, they could all go and wife. All 7 of those can a Kohen's allowed to become tamei for them and can go to the funeral.
We
But
went.
other than that, even a grandparent, you're not allowed to go. And so as a
Really?
result, yeah.
Even
So
a
as a result,
Here.
often Kohanim will be buried in areas of the cemetery that are where there are no other people buried, so that people can come relatively close without violating.
Very interesting.
So yeah, very interesting. But you're absolutely right that there's this idea of becoming tamei, and that we have to
Seriously
be
taken.
taken very seriously. That's
Yeah,
exactly
we went
right.
to my father and mom, but we had to go to.
Yeah, you went to their funeral?
Well,
Yeah,
one
I'm
was,
sure.
both New Jersey.
Okay.
New Jersey.
All right. So that is how Rashi understands Rabbi Yochanan's statement that we're talking about
My cousin
whether
Jerry
or
told us.
not
Yeah, he told us.
whether or not you are whether or not a positive commandment that is related to a negative commandment is considered one that is lenitek, that is going to be a shenitek, and when therefore is going to be one where you're exempt from lashes, or do we say no, it's not shenitek, it's not repairing, and therefore you are still subject? And as Rashi understands it, and that's how we'll deal with it right now, we're going to say that involves a positive commandment that you could have done anyway. So Amru Lo, so the people who are hearing this statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and so Rashi tells us, they ask Rabbi Yochanan, Amart, did you in fact say this? Amr lahu, lo. He says, no, I didn't say it. And what Rashi says is chazar bo. He did say it. He admits that he actually said it. He's not actually saying that the guy's a liar, but he's saying that's not my opinion any longer. And so as a result, and so and so Amar Rabbah, who was the one who made the statement, now goes back and says, Hi Elokim, 1 second, by Hashem's name. Amra, he said it. And Uksiva Vitanina. And not only did he say it, but actually, this really should be the law, because we have a pasuk that seems to suggest that it's true, and a Mishnah that seems to suggest that it's true. Ksiva v'yishalachu min hamachaneh. We have a positive commandment that you should send out of the camp anybody who is tamei, v'lo yitamo es hamachaneh es machaneim. And we have a negative commandment that they are not supposed to defile the camp. So although I might have thought that this is a lav shenitek la'aseh, that when you do the defilement, you fix it by going out. No. So again, as Rashi says, matzinu ksiva v'tanina, matzinu kasav lo taseh shekadmu aseh. We can find a negative commandment for which the positive commandment comes first. V'tanina alah delokin, and yet we specifically know that this is a punishment that you get malchus for, that you get lashes. Lo sagile b'kiyama aseh. It's not sufficient for you to just do the positive commandment to repair the negative commandment. And Tanina, we have in our Mishnah, Habala Mikdash Tameh, that if somebody who comes into the base of Mikdash and he's Tameh, he's going to get lashes. And so as a result, this seems like a definitive proof that Rabbi Yochanan's statement is right, because we see that in fact there's at least one example of a positive commandment written before a negative commandment, which one might have thought is a lav shenitek la'aseh, but is not in fact a lav shenitek la'aseh, and therefore is going to get lashes. Elamai time of So all right, so now why did Rabbi Yochanan change his mind? So that's the problem that we've got right now. So why did he change his mind? So mishum dekashale onis, because he had a difficulty with the following situation. The following situation is a situation of a rapist. The Tanya, onus shegerash. If you have a rapist, now let's be clear that these rules were set at a particular time in a certain particular setting. But the rule is that if somebody, if a woman gets raped and is unmarried, the rapist is obligated to marry her and take care of her and pay for all of her expenses and for essentially enabling her to live. Now, she does not need to marry him. She can say no, but he can't say no. He has to marry her. And it's essentially a form of punishment that ensures that women who were, in those ages were really taken advantage of. So we need them to be taken care of. So what happens if after he marries her, he divorces her? He's not allowed to divorce her. He has to marry her and stay married to her for the rest of his life because that's part of the obligation that he has. So if he divorces her, im Yisrael hu machzir ve'ein aloka, well, then he can take her back as a wife again, and he won't get lashed. Im Kohen hu, but if he's a Kohen, well, now he can't take her back because she's a divorcee.
Right.
And so as a result, loka ve'ein machzir, he gets lashes and he does not have to marry her again. So what did we just say? Im Yisrael hu machzir ve'ein loka amai. But maybe we should say that this requirement to marry her is a positive commandment that came before the negative commandment, right? The negative commandment is the prohibition of divorcing her, but the positive commandment of marrying her happened before he even divorced her the first time. It was his first marriage to her that was obligated. And so this is not a lav shenitik laseh, but rather this is a lav, this is a lo taseh shekadamo aseh, that has a positive commandment ahead of it. And so why doesn't the Yisrael get lashes? Right? Im Yisrael hu machzir ve'ein loka amai lo saseh shikdamo asehu. This is exactly the rule that Rabbi Yochanan initially said. And so Rabbi Yochanan's thinking was, I can't explain this.
Right.
And as a result, since I can't explain it, I retracted my original statement. So we are now going to spend much of the rest of today going through 4 different efforts to try and explain why it is that actually Rabbah's statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that is actually a valid statement, and that it can stand notwithstanding this case.
So just going back for a second, he marries her. She doesn't want to have relations with him. He rapes her.
No. Man doesn't want to have relations with a woman. Before they get married. Right. Or are you giving me a new situation?
New situation. He agrees to marry her after what happened.
Okay, so
he raped her.
All right, so he raped. So let's start with 1. He rapes her.
Raped her,
and now he's forced to marry her.
Right, and
she agrees.
But she decides, I don't want to have relations with him, and then he rapes her.
So if she decides that she doesn't want to have relations with him, then he may be entitled to divorce her, but he is not entitled to rape her.
Okay.
Okay. All right, but that's
well, am I using the right term? If he forces herself on her, that's rape, isn't it?
Well, in the biblical sense, it may be a different situation,
okay,
but the bottom line is he shouldn't do it.
Right.
So now again, so we're trying to explain why is it that a Yisrael who raped someone, who divorces the victim, even though he's required to stay married, why isn't he getting lashes, as a result of the fact that he can remarry her? Why does the fact that he can remarry her allow us to avoid lashes? We should say that it's a lo taseh shekadamo aseh, and therefore vililke, and he should get lashes. So Amar Ula, lo yomar lo siyeh leisha ba'ones, right? It really, the Torah doesn't need to tell us that a rapist needs to marry his victim. Viligmar memotzi shemra, because we would know the obligation to marry the victim from a different story that the Torah tells us. the Torah tells us that if someone marries somebody, specifically a Na'ara, who has not been married previously and not had relations previously, and then they have relations on the first night, and the man goes immediately to the Beis Din and says she was not actually a virgin, and she must have had relations with somebody while we were engaged. And so as a result, she deserves the death penalty. And then it turns out that his efforts of evidence fail, and she actually can prove that she was a virgin. And so as a result, she now gets to go, so she now cannot be divorced in that situation. And if he divorces her, he needs to remarry her. Again, just like with the rapist,
Right.
the same rule applies. So what Ula is suggesting is that we could have learned the requirement of an ones to marry the victim from the situation of somebody who's a motzi shemra, ligmar motzi shemra, the person who told the story about a woman who he married, and now he's not allowed, the false story, and now he's not allowed to divorce her. Uma motzi shemra lo shelo asa masa. When it comes to a defamer, all he did was speak. That was the only sin he did, was to talk about her. So Amar Rachmana v'lo siyeh isha, right? She's gonna be a wife to him, meaning that until he dies. Ones, lo kol shekain. Well, then certainly somebody who does something more severe. So therefore, why was it said? So as a result, im eino inyan lefanav, if it's not applicable to the marriage, to the initial marriage of the ones, so then teneo inyan la'akrav. So we'll learn the obligation. We'll learn that the nature of the obligation to marry the rape victim is specifically telling us that if you get divorced, then you have to remarry her. And so now it's not a lo taseh shekadamo aseh, but rather it's a lo taseh shenitek la'aseh.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we now have a fix. So tano inyan la'akrav she'im geirash yachzir, that if he divorces her, he has to remarry her. And so now that it's a fix, well, now we understand why there's not going to be any lashes, because it's a fix. Va'akati onis mimotzi shemra lo gamar. 1 second. How are you going to try and learn an ones case, a rape case, from the case of a defamer? De'ika lemifra. We have a good question that one can ask, because although if you were to go from the more serious to the less serious, you'd be, say from the, in this case, we want to go say that on some level, the sin of rape is more severe than the sin of motzi shemra, right? We're saying that because the sin of motzi shemra requires the perpetrator to stay married to her, so the ones, which is a more severe sin, will certainly require him to stay married to her. So, but the problem is that if we find a way in which the motzi shemra is more severe than the ones case, well, then all of a sudden we've undermined that effort. And in fact, we can say de'ika lemifrach mala motzi shemra shekain loka umishalem. There's a special rule when it comes to a defamer. He gets 2 penalties. He both pays a fine and to the father, and he gets lashes. Whereas when it comes to the rape victim, he gets a fine, but there are no malchus, there are no lashes. So Ella lo yomar lo siyeh leisha b'motzi shemra. So as a result, let's reverse the idea that Ula had. And let's say that really we didn't need to say lo siyeh leisha, that he should be a wife for him. She should be a wife for him with respect to the motzi shemra case, the defamation case. V'ligmar ma'onis. And we would know that the defamation case requires the man to stay married to the woman because of the ones case. Uma ones she'ein loka umishalem, when you have the sin of ones, which doesn't get the punishment of both lashes and paying money. Amar Rachmana v'lo siyeh leisha, she has to remain his wife. Motzi shemra lo kol shekain. Certainly we should say the same thing by the case of defamation. Vilama nemar. So why does it say it by the defamation case? Im eino inyan. Well, motzi shemra. Well, it has no applicability to motzi shemra, to the defamation case. So teneo inyan laonis. So we'll talk about it in connection with the onus case. And in eino inyan lefanav. And if it doesn't have any applicability to beforehand, because the Torah explicitly says that he has to marry her, so we'll say that it applies afterwards. Teneo inyan la'achrav. We'll say that it applies afterwards, meaning that if he were to divorce her, there's a separate commandment for him to remarry her. And so as a result, it is a lav shenitek la'aseh. So the problem is, umotzi shemra me'onis nami lo gamar. We can't learn from motzi shemra. We can't learn motzi shemra from an ones, because the ikal mifrach, we have a good question. Ma la onis shekain asamaisa. When it comes to an ones, that has a more severe component, that it involved an action. And so as a result, maybe we require the marriage in the ones case because he involved an action, and we wouldn't require marriage in the motzi shemra case because it doesn't involve an action, because speaking isn't considered an action. Ella lo yomar lo siyeh leisha b'motzi shemra. Shahare ishtohi. Maybe we can give a different reason that it didn't need to say lo siyeh leisha in connection with the defamation, that she should be for him a wife, because he's already married to her, right? The situation of defamation is that he comes the day after they get married and says she wasn't a virgin, but they're already married. So it doesn't need to tell us that he should be a wife. She's going to be a wife for him. So lama nemar. So why was it said? Again, same concept. If it doesn't apply to the defamation case, so we'll say it applies to the rape case. And if it doesn't apply to the original marriage of an ones, because the Torah tells us specifically that they need to get married, so we'll say that it applies afterwards. And again, we'll end up, this is effort number 3. We've now tried 3 times, and we'll say that this is in fact, teaching us that in fact this is a lav shenitek la'aseh. Ve'ema, for 1 second, because the eino inyan lefanav demotzi shemra teneo inyan la'achrav didei delo lucky. Maybe we need to learn the fact that it says, again, you're right, it didn't need to say lo siyeh leisha by a motzi shemra, but maybe it's saying it by a motzi shemra to specifically tell us that if the motzi shemra were to divorce his wife, he needs to remarry her. And so as a result, teneu inyan la'achrav didei delo lucky, specifically tell us that the defamer doesn't get lashes if he because he can remarry her. So einachinami, you're absolutely right. It does have to tell us that. But so, what we'll do is we'll say that we're going to learn the rape case from the defamation case. But 1 second, but my gomer mine, how are you going to learn the rape case from the case of defamation? Because even kavachomer, even mamatzinu, whatever effort you try to learn from one to the other, ikalamifrach, we've seen that we can already challenge. I mean, you have the word here. It's as if the Gemara at some point somebody who said kida parchinan, right? As we've already challenged. Bottom line, malamoti shemra shekain lo ase maseh. We're going to be able to say that when it comes to defamation, he didn't commit an action; he only did the speech, and so you cannot learn from there to a situation to where he did do an action, because maybe there's a different rule that would apply. Ella amarava hol yamav ba'amud v'hachazer. So we have to come up with a new approach. And let's take a look at Rashi as he explains what this approach is. Ella Amaraba, we're 6 lines up. Ha detanya ba'one, Ella Amaraba, ha detanya ba'ones machzir. The fact that we say that a rapist needs to take back the wife, all right, ve'eno loka, and doesn't get lashes, it is in fact a lav shenitek la'aseh. It is a prohibition that can be fixed with a positive commandment. And how do I know that? The amrkra kol yamav, because the Torah specifically says that they have to stay married kol yamav. So let me find the pasuk.
The lawyer would say, call your up, something like this. I'll tell the lawyer would say, I think it's lawyer would say, call your up, no?
Yeah. I'm just trying to find it. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I don't have the.
שלא ישלחו, שלא ישלח, call your up, I think, something.
Yeah, something like that. So the point is that those words lo habalei lemichtav, because it could have just said ella lo yuchal l'shalcha. It could have just said that you can't divorce her. So my kol yamav. Why does it specifically, continuing on in Rashi, now in the last line of Rashi, why does the pasuk specifically say kol yamav? Right? It says lo yochol l'shalcha kol yamav. He's not allowed. This is Dvarim Perak Bet pasuk Yud Tet. So why does it specifically say that he's not allowed to marry her? Lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav. So hachikamar lo tehei b'shilcha kol yamav. He's not allowed to send her away all his days. Ella yaksi rena. Rather, he has to remarry her. V'al karchach amud b'hechzer ka'amar. And certainly this is talking about saying that he has to get up and take her back. V'haki kamar. And this is what we're saying. V'lo siyeh le'isha. He's going to be for him a wife. Im shalcha. And if he sends her out, shelo yehu shilucha. L'kol yamav. He's not allowed to send her out all of the days. Harei ha'aseh achar havaret halav. So we see that the positive commandment of taking her back is specifically after the negative commandment and isn't a separate commandment to marry her in the first place. And so therefore, we've made this into a lav shenitek la'aseh.
That's not really positive, is it? The pasuk says, "Tachat asher ina lo yuchal shalcha kol yamav." There's a lo in there in the pasuk, right?
Right, but the lo yuchal shalcha is the negative commandment, and what we're understanding is kol yamav implies a positive commandment of taking her back. And so as a result, we are going to say it's a positive commandment, and the positive commandment is referred to by the words kol yamav. And that is and so now that's the aseh that is nitek the lo taseh. And so as a result, that's what's going to allow the Yisrael to not be lashed as long as he's able to remarry her. V'chein ki asa Rabin amar Rabbi Yochanan kol yamav ba'amud v'hachzer. That the words kol yamav imply that the guy needs to get up and remarry her.
So kol yamav is an aseh?
Yes, that kol yamav, we're going to effectively learn from that a positive commandment.
Now, there is the issue of chamishim kesef as well, right?
Correct. He's going to have to pay the fine. Absolutely. That's part of his penalty. The thing that he doesn't have is the lashes. Okay, so now we're going to have a different objection to the Rabbi Yochanan's rule. So we've now understand how Rabbah could make his statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and we know why Rabbi Yochanan rejected it, and we know why Rabbah says, even though Rabbi Yochanan might have taken it back, I believe it's true. And now, but Rav Papa is going to ask another question on the rule about how can we say that the person gets malchus if you have a positive commandment that comes before the negative commandment. So Amrle Rav Papa la Rava v'ha lo dummy lave lelav de chasima. But 1 second, we know that every negative commandment for which one is supposed to get lashes must be comparable to the prohibition of muzzling, because again, in Dvarim, what was it? Dvarim Perek Kaf Hey, right? Pasuk Gimel, it talks about lashes, and in Pasuk Dalid, it talks about muzzling, and so the juxtaposition of those mean that every prohibition for which one is supposed to get lashes needs to be similar to muzzling, or there needs to be an explicit noting of the fact that you need that you're going to get malchus. So Amar Le, Rava responds, no, mishum dekasa beirachmana aseh yisera migra gara. You're going to tell me, Rava says back, that because there's a positive commandment that happens to be next to it, that's going to make things worse? No. So when second Rav Papa says back, well, why don't you say that about a negative commandment which can be repaired by the positive commandment? So lema mishum de kazav rachmana, but be kazav be rachmana asay yisera migra gara. Why don't you ask the same question, that we're gonna say that a negative commandment gets treated less just because we have an extra positive commandment associated with it? So Rava responds, as I'm sure you probably are thinking, that's fixing the lav. When it fixes the lav, so then it's not like muzzling. But when it's just next to a positive commandment and it's not actually fixing the negative commandment, so then the negative commandment is just like muzzling and can get the punishment. And so there we have it. We have explained how we can say that basically now we have although we've had essentially 3 rules, we have a rule that say exclude things from being subject to lashes, that exclude commandments from being subject to lashes. We can say that there's a 4th rule potentially, that a lav shekadmo asay, where a positive commandment can happen beforehand, that is not considered a lav shenitik la'asay, and therefore can result in lashes.
And now, how are you bringing this? The pasuk. There's no hekesh here. The pasuk of
Between
lo
what?
tachsom shor b'disho is not next to the pasuk of the lo yuchla kol yomav, lo yuchla shalcha kol yomav.
No. The juxtaposition of in Dvarim Kav Hey is that pasuk Kav Gimel tells us about the fact that people get lashes as a penalty, and pasuk Dalet is the one that tells us about the about not muzzling when you're threshing.
Pasuk Hey, I think.
I'm
looking at the Chumash right now.
Notes here, it's pasuk Gimel and Dalet.
And I'm looking at the pasuk in the Chumash now. It's pasuk
Okay.
Hey. Lo tachsom shor b'disho.
No, but what's pasuk Dalet say?
Pasuk Daled is Arba'im yakenu lelo yosif pen yosif lakoto al ela makar rabah v'nikla achika leinecha.
Okay. So they have it wrong here. So it should be pasuk Dal, or I have it wrong. I thought that was based on the citations here in ArtScroll, but I'll have to change it to Dalet and Hey. So okay, so it's Dalet and Hey. So I'll take a look and see. Okay.
But
So-
that's not related to the lo yuchla.
But no, it's not. The point is that it's that juxtaposition that says that every commandment that is going to get lashes must be similar to the muzzling commandment.
They're both lavs. Is that what you're
That
saying?
it has to be a lav.
Right.
It can't be a lav shenitik la'aseh, and it can't be a and it has to be a lav sheyesh bo maisa. Those are the 3 things that we learn in connection with the fact that it has to be like muzzling.
Yesh bo maisa. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that it has to be
Right,
yesh
okay.
bo maisa. Exactly. Okay, so tomorrow, and I guess a little bit today, we're going to see a barisa about which there's an argument regarding its language.
No.
Okay, and so this brisa, I'm just maybe it's you know what, maybe it's a brisa that I'm not sure whether we're going to see it also tomorrow, but okay, I have to double check. So the brisa that we're going to see shortly is going to discuss a situation in which one does not receive lashes for a lav shenitek la'aseh.
Well, I got to make correction. It's pasuk Gimel and Daled. In the,
All right, good, because that's what I said.
yeah, I'm looking at the lo tachsom shor, but there's a very short pasuk, and then So I'm not okay. I made a mistake. It's that. It's Gimel and Dalet.
All right. Thank you for correcting yourself. I appreciate that. Okay. So Baruch Hashem, my daf is correct. Okay. So we've now noted the fact that a lav shenitik la'aseh is doesn't get lashes. And it seems like, based on the brisa that we cited, that if the Yisrael has the ability to marry the woman, right? If we have the Yisrael who's the rapist, who has the ability to remarry his wife, then he's not going to get lashes.
Correct.
We are going to see a brisa that has a machlokes in connection with how one understands the concept of the violation of a lav shenitik la'aseh in terms of lashes, because there are two possibilities. Possibility number one is that really, as soon as you do the lav shenitik la'aseh, the negative commandment that is possible to fix, but you haven't yet fixed it, maybe you're obligated in lashes right now.
At the moment.
At the moment, as soon as you do it.
Right.
But how do you get out of the obligation of lashes? It's because you do the positive commandment. And so now you've done the positive commandment and you're no longer going to be subject to lashes.
What if he's a Kohen?
Well, if he's a Kohen, he won't be able to do it. And we saw in the brisa that a Kohen the rapist Kohen who divorces his wife is going to get lashes. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's not going to be a problem. You're absolutely right. He's going to get lashes. Now, but another way we can understand it is that it's not that the negative, as soon as he does the negative commandment, he's subject to lashes. But when he does the negative commandment, he may be potentially subject to lashes, but it's only when he can't do the aseh that is going to fix it. Then he can't do the positive commandment that's going to fix it. Only then does he become obligated in lashes. So the question that we're going to see is the following. So let's take a look. So hanicha lamanda amar bitlo velo bitlo, that our understanding of this entire discussion makes sense according to the viewpoint that when are you subject to lashes? It's only when you've nullified the possibility of doing the positive commandment. But if you haven't nullified the possibility of doing the positive commandment, well then, because you can still fix your problem, we're going to say you're not subject to lashes. And so that's why the Yisrael, who's capable of remarrying his divorcee victim, rape victim, is going to not get lashes because he can remarry her, whereas the Kohen cannot. And so as a result, he will get lashes. But Elolamanda Amar Kimu Velo Kimu. But according to the viewpoint that says that the brisa is actually talking about a situation where you did fulfill it and you didn't fulfill it, meaning that the only time you won't get lashes is if you actually fulfilled the positive commandment. And it's as long as you did not fulfill the positive commandment, you will get lashes. Ma'ika lamemar. What are you going to say? Our whole answer doesn't really work. So the Gemara answers as we turn to Tet Vavam Bet. Midihu Taimud Ela Rabbi Yochanan. But 1 second, who are we trying to explain here? We're trying to explain Rabbi Yochanan. And Ha'amar le Rabbi Yochanan Latana. And Rabbi Yochanan was the one who taught this Tana. Tanei bitlo chayiv velo bitlo pater. You should teach the brisa that we're about to read that if he nullified it, he's liable, and if he did not nullify it, he's not liable for lashes. And so, what's the story that we're now going to explain, and what's the brisa that we're talking about? The Tani Kamei de Rabbi Yochanan, a teacher of brisas, a Tana taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan, kol mitzvahs. Lo sa'aseh sheyesh ba kum aseh, any negative commandment that has in it a positive commandment, namely that it can be fixed through a positive commandment, kiem aseh sheba, if you fulfill the positive commandment, patur, then you're not going to be liable for lashes. Bitel aseh sheba, but if you nullify the positive commandment, chayav, then you are liable. But the problem with that statement is that there is a lot of in between. What happens if you haven't fulfilled it and you haven't nullified it? What's your story? What's the status? So Amar Le, Rabbi Yochanan says, my Ka'amrat, what are you talking about? You have to be consistent. You need to close that gap between the two parts of the statement. Because in one part, he talked about actual fulfillment, and in one part, he talked about nullification. And if you talk about those two, then you're going to have a gap that you will not have given us the law. And so as a result, you have to either talk about fulfillment and non-fulfillment, or nullification and non-nullification. So as a result, my Ka'amra, Kiyim Pater Velo Kiyim Chayiv. You should either be teaching that if you fulfill it, you're exempt, and if you don't fulfill it, you're liable, or you should be teaching Bitel Chayiv, Lo Bitel Patel, or you should be teaching that if you nullified it, you're liable, and if you did not nullify it, you're not liable. Meaning there's a gap here that needs to be taught about. So, and Tanei and Rabbi Yochanan continues, this is how you should teach it. Bitlu below bitlu. Nullify it. If it's nullified, he's liable for lashes. And if he doesn't nullify it, he's not liable for lashes. And so as a result, and Rashi explains, what is talking about in the nullification kind of situation? It's dealing with a situation where the man says that this woman, I'm swearing that this woman's not going to be able to benefit from me. And so as a result, in that situation, he's not allowed to marry her again, because if he marries her, he has obligations for her to give her benefit. And so as a result, he will not be able to marry her. And so in that situation, he'll nullify his marriage possibility, and he will get lashes. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, kimu v'lo kimu. And Rish Lakish says, no, it's not based on whether or not you nullify it, but it's based on whether or not you fulfill it. That you have to actually have fulfilled the mitzvah in order to be able to avoid the lashes. That if you don't fulfill it, you should get the lashes immediately. So, but
why is it not like Kumbalo? I say, if I think it's like a yes or no. If he marries her, he's Makayim, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. Why does he have to literally say, I'm not going to marry, I'm not going to take this woman? Where's the gap? I mean, again, either he does or he doesn't.
No, the gap is waiting, is the delay. I mean, the point is that if he could marry her and hasn't yet married her, is he liable for lashes at this moment? According to
how much time elapsed? You got the 20 seconds or 2 years?
Well, the point is, and Rashi goes through this in a little bit more detail, we'll see momentarily, that if they come to court, the court would, according to Rabbi Yochanan, I got to fix that. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you would say that there's no case because it's still physically possible for him to marry. But according to Reish Lakish, the court would tell the perpetrator, you have two choices right now. You can either marry her here in court this second, or you can get lashed. And that's the difference. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there's essentially, you would need, basically until the court can end up in a place where it might lash the person because the person's not listening to the court, but it's not a biblical violation that they're lashing. They're lashing him because he's not listening to the court. But according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, as soon as when he's in court, the court can essentially give him two choices: marry her this instant, or get lashed.
So wait, so what happens to the woman? He's required to marry her, right? Lo shachu kol yamav. So if he doesn't, so let's say, is she considered a aguna, that she can't marry anybody else? What's the story then?
So if remember, we're either talking about before they got married in the first place, or before or after he divorced her, and she is entitled to say no. She has the right to say no. So as a result, yes, she could go. She's not an aguna. She could go and marry anybody she wants. But apparently, she wants to marry him because she wants him to take care of her, because now she has lost various prospects. So that could be what we're talking about. And so that's the story. So
Maybe she doesn't want him
if she
because he
doesn't want
raped
him, she
her,
doesn't
right?
have to marry him. She doesn't have to. She does not have to.
So then it ends, right? Is he still
Then it ends.
obligated? Is still
Correct.
is he
And then he
still
won't get
chayav?
lashes because he didn't, he's not violating anything because she doesn't want to marry him.
Oh, so he's not chayav in Makkot.
No, because he didn't. He's going to pay the penalty. He's paying her, a fine. Okay. So, but my commitment, what is it that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan are really arguing about? Bahasra Suffolk commitment. They're arguing about an uncertain warning. Marsav or Hasra Suffolk. Shema Hasra, according to Rabbi Yochanan says that an uncertain warning is a valid warning. And so what is that talking about? Let's take a look at Rashi, first of the wide lines on the bottom of Tet Vavam at Bet. Rabbi Yochanan Savar Hasra Savik Shema Hasra, Va'afal Gapta Kol Lo Taseh Shenik Takla Aseh, that even though whenever you have a negative commandment that can be fixed with a positive commandment, Lidva Rav Hasra Safiki, that according to his view, it is an uncertain warning because you don't know for sure whether this person is going to be liable for lashes, because the only time that the man would be liable for lashes is if he does something that prevents her from being his wife again. Sha'arei kisha over al halav, when he violates the negative commandment, tzarich lahasros bo, because it's when he's going to violate the negative commandment, namely when he's going to divorce her, that's when you need to give him the warning. V'hu amar shegamar halav, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, he says that the completion of the negative commandment is bebitol ha'aseh, is when he nullifies his possibility of doing the positive commandment. It's dependent on his nullifying that positive commandment. Vikishimasrin bo, and when they give him the hasra, al tigaresh, don't divorce her. Suffiku, it's a uncertain situation because Shema lo yavatel, maybe he will never nullify the mitzvah of taking her back. Es ha'aseh lahadira bahanad, that he will never nullify the positive commandment by making a neder of saying that she can't benefit from him. And it's only when he makes that neder and nullifies it that he's going to kamar deloki, that's when the person would get the lashes. Alma hasra suffix shema hasra. So we see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that a uncertain warning is considered a sufficient warning. Umar Savar and Reish Lakish believes, as we poke out back into the Gemara 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up in from the bottom of Tet Vavam Abed, Mar Savar Hasra Savik Lo Shema Hasra. He says that an uncertain warning is not going to be considered a valid warning. And so let's take a look at Rashi again. Now, again, the next Rashi, Rabbi Reish Lakish, Savar Hasra Safek Lo Shema Hasra. Rashi does the kindness of telling us who the Mar is, because even though the Gemara did not, Rashi told us it was Rabbi Yochanan and then Reish Lakish, as we could have figured out on our own, but it's nice to have Rashi tell us that we're right. Hilkach. So as a result, Rashi says, Im Haya Gamar Halav, if in fact the negative commandment were dependent on nullifying the positive commandment, lo hayaloka alav, he would never get lashes because the negative, the warning was an uncertain warning. Ela halav mishagirish nigmar. As soon as he divorces her, according to Reish Lakish, the negative commandment has been fulfilled, has been violated. And so v'havya la hasras vaday. And so as a result, it is a definite warning. V'aseh nitin leyot tachas hamalkus. And the point is that the positive commandment comes to replace the lashes. Ukishiyavo lebastin, and when they come to court, this is the point that Ken was making, o yekayim, o yelakeh. Either he has to, at that moment, fulfill it, or he'll get lashes. So now we have the question. And now Rashi asks a question that is a very kind of Tosfos-y kind of question. This is why it's a long Rashi. The ikasha, and if you want to know, 1 second, Rebbe Yochanan, according to Rebbe Yochanan, Nami Ikalamemer Bahasras Vadai. Maybe Rebbe Yochanan also requires a certain warning, and that the warning needs to come not at the moment of divorce, but at the moment before the man makes the neder, saying that the woman's not going to benefit from me, and as a result, he's not going to be able, and he's being mevatel the aseh. Maybe it's at that moment that he needs to be warned. The yisru bo kishabala batel es aseh, and it's only when he comes to nullify the positive commandment that's when he gets warned. Shehu akiras halav, because that's going to uproot effectively the negative commandment, la'olam, and make it a permanent negative commandment. So, and hasra, so the answer is hasra b'shasha over al azhara so be'inan. No, the problem is that the negative commandment remains the divorcing, and you need to give the warning at the moment of the negative commandment. Even if it's dependent on something, on something else. As we are going to, God willing, see when we get to Maseches Shavuos, Shavua shelo ochel ki karzu im ochel zu. If I make an oath that I'm not going to eat piece of bread number 1, if I eat piece of bread number 2, so then achilo l'tanai v'hadar achilo l'isura hasras vadaihi. If I eat number 2 first, well then, when somebody warns me, don't eat number 1 because you'll be violating your oath, it's a certain warning. And as a result, that's great. But achle l'isura v'hadar achle l'tanai. But if I were to eat piece number 1 first, and the violation is only going to be in existence if I also eat piece number 2. Well, now the warning that somebody gives me when I eat piece number 1, havya hasras safek, that's going to be an uncertain warning. And so as a result, the Gemara there doesn't tell us, oh, well, why don't you just give the warning when the person eats piece number 2, the second piece? No, the Gemara doesn't say that. So as a result, it can't work at that time. So alma hasra b'shas iser be'inan. You need to have the warning at the moment of the prohibitive act. And in this case, my oath was, again, I'm not making an oath, but the oath that the person makes is that the eating of piece number 1 is the negative action, but it only applies if piece number 2 was eaten also. And so as a result, the afal pisha ein halav nigmar achi yochel es shel tanai. So as a result, even though the conditional piece doesn't get eaten, we're going to say that this is when the warning has to happen, and as a result, it is a warning al tanai. And we have that as a machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And so
what's the connection with the gerushin here? The divorce.
The connection between the divorce is that according to Reish Lakish, that when we say that when the Yisrael, the rapist, divorces his wife, so then he gets brought to the court and he has 2 choices. He can marry her right then, or he can get lashes. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, as long as the possibility of marrying her exists, he won't be lashed.
Well, wait, but is this onus or is it gay? But he's already married to her, right? Well,
No. The case of onus that we've been talking about all along is he married her and then he divorced her. That's the brisa that we saw much earlier today. That the brisa is that
so it's a lav because he has to stay with her kol yamav.
Correct. Well, the lav is that he's not allowed to divorce her,
right.
And the positive commandment is that he has to stay with her kol yamav. All right, we have to close, but
he's not allowed to divorce her.
Correct. He's not allowed to divorce her, and if he does divorce her, he has an obligation to remarry her.
Well, how did
I'm sorry, but there's another class that has to be
permit
given
the divorce though? How did they even permit divorce?
Because he divorced her. He gave her the get.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. Be well. Bye.